Welcome back to the Testing 1, 2, 3 podcast. As always, I'm Brett, joined by Lester. Lester, today we're talking about forgiveness.
We're talking about forgiveness. I think it's one of those big topics that we talk about often as Christians, but we don't actually fully understand what that means, or we don't live it out the way that we understand it. So I think forgiveness is one of those things that we need to be talking about often, and here we are doing it today. So I think to get us started, I think a good place to start is why. Why do we forgive? And any chance to plug the gospel, I think, is one that we need to take. And so forgiveness really starts with the gospel. If we think about what God did for us on the cross, Jesus does for us on the cross, is that he forgives the sins that we have ultimately committed against him. If you think about sin, we often, or wrongdoing, if you will, we often think about like, maybe I have wronged Brett or Brett has wronged me.
No, it's never happened.
Or I have wronged a person or this person has wronged me. It doesn't matter. We often kind of think of sin horizontally between people. But when we commit any sin, actually, the biggest problem with that is that we've wronged God. God is God is offended when every single sin is committed between people or to myself. If I've sinned against myself or I sinned against him, ultimately God is the one who is harmed by sin. Yet he is the one who dies on the cross, and that is that ultimate demonstration of forgiveness.
Yeah, I would only mend one word there. I would say offended, yes, but also affected.
Yes.
Yeah. Offended sounds like he's just like, oh no, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like I don't want. Maybe that word has just got, some weird connotations about it because people use it a lot now. But
Yeah.
I would just say like affected. He's affected by it as well.
Yeah. Slighted even.
Yeah.
So God is slighted by our sin. And you have to remember that this is God. When you offend or slight God, this is not like, oh, you hurt my feelings. Like, no, this is an affront to his holiness. I think we often, maybe often is a difficult word, but like, it's lost on us who God is and how holy he is, and what his standard is. And how often that you and I fall short of this, how like constant our sin is. Just driving over here, I mean, probably I committed like 4 sins, maybe 5. Who knows? Like I parked my car this morning outside the church, and I didn't thank the Lord that like he brought me here safely. That like all my tires didn't explode and my engine didn't combust. In an uncontrolled manner.
I don't think it's a sin not to. I'd say you'd be a little harder to yourself that because you didn't thank the Lord for specifically your tires not exploding, that you've sinned against him.
The point is, ungraciousness is a sin. Or ungratefulness. Sorry, not ungracious. Ungrateful.
I mean, you could say being ungracious,
both of them. But ungratefulness is a sin, and I think that we often take the blessings that God has given us way for granted, like the home that you woke up in this morning, the bed that you slept in last night. How often do you actually praise the Lord for those items? Do you count them as blessings? Do you remember his goodness to you in every circumstance? I mean, you ate dinner last night, did you not? You ate something for breakfast this morning, did you not? Did we truly express gratitude to God for those blessings and that faithfulness that he demonstrated towards us? Probably not. Like I just kind of ate it. Like maybe I said rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub before the meal. But did you really spend time in worship over it? Not so much. And so when we take God for granted, this is sin. It's sin, and we constantly sin.
Yeah, I think I don't love the examples you're using because they're so minor. Like, if you said rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, but your heart was in the right place, then, like, I would argue.
But what if it was in the wrong place?
Okay, yeah, but I just say like,
Are you sure your heart was in the right place?
I can't judge the heart. That's a big difference between me and God. But I think I understand what you're saying is just being ungrateful for your surroundings is a sin. I don't love the examples you're using because you're making like you can be grateful and say rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, as long as your heart's there. Like the words you use are less important as your heart position. Mm-hmm. So I want you to use a better example of ungratefulness.
Yeah, so I think a better example of ungratefulness would be like how often is it that I think about where I am in life and the blessings and the journey that God has taken me through. How often do I like actually look back and reflect on that in my devotional time? Probably not that often, if we're being honest with ourselves. Where we spend time worshiping God and thanking God for how amazing He's been to us over the past week. Mm-hmm. That's a spiritual discipline that we just don't often undergo. We might do that maybe once a year, maybe once every few months. But do we do that daily? Do we do that hourly? Not really.
No. Yeah, you definitely have me there on that one. I don't think everything we do we turn and thank God for, and we should.
So you've fallen short is the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people, and I'm not arguing your preposition of saying like ungratefulness is a sin. I'm not arguing that point. Mm-hmm. But I think when we think of sins, we think more of an act against God, not a omission of an act. Do you mean? Not that they're both sins. I'm not saying that, but I think they're the first place. Like, yes, we need to be grateful, more grateful, and that. But I'll take myself as an example. I'm right now. I'm very broken, just like everyone else is, and yes, I'm going to forget to thank God for things, and yes, I'm going to forget to bring God into things in my life. But at the same time, like I'm working through things that I'm actively doing against God right now. And I'm not saying you shouldn't work on it at all, but I think for most of our listeners, heck, if you're at the point where your only sin is a mission of gratefulness, then like,
wow,
hey, good on you, man.
Wow,
that is awesome. But like, not saying you shouldn't work on that. I'm just saying I think some people like, by using this as our example, it's like, wait, that's the only two things you guys struggle with is like not being grateful enough. That's not a representation of our lives. That's all I'm trying to say. Like,
I actually intentionally picked a super minute example.
I was wondering, I'm like, this, Lester, we got to be more,
because obviously we all commit sins greater than this. You're making the point actually for me that we all commit sins greater than this. Yet even something this small is considered a sin. So if you have all these like tiny little sins here in your eyes, tiny little sins, yet are slights and affronts to God, how about the bigger sins that you're aware that you're committing? The sins of commission, if you will. I mean, there's sins of omission, things that you didn't do, and sins of commission, things that you did do. So how much more is that debt, if you will, piling up? Where you're not aware of all the sins that you
it's not piling up at all because of forgiveness, but
right. But that's the thing that
I see. You used a minute example to show like if we even struggle to do this, how much more are we struggling with things in our life, like sinning against God?
Exactly.
Because the point I was making is like I thought you were just going to talk on sins of omission. I was like, hey, we need to bring up sins of commission because that's like probably the more visually apparent sins in our life are the sins of commission. You know what I mean? Like the ones that we're like, wow, I really need to stop that, or I really need to change that, or I shouldn't have just, yelled at that lady and cut her off and ran her into a stop sign and got away, I'm trying to use your driving here example. I'm trying to use your driving. I've never done that, but I'm trying to use your driving here example. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I understand where you're going with this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of sin that we commit against God is just insurmountable. Like, you could not fathom how much sin you've committed against God, yet He forgives all of it. And all of it is a slight towards Him, yet He forgives all of it. Colossians 3, 13 says, "Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you." And I think that's the difficult part about forgiveness is that, okay, we as Christians accept that God has forgiven us, right? We believe that, yes, Jesus died for my sins on the cross and my sins have been forgiven. So all of that insurmountable sin has been forgiven. Yet I now struggle to forgive others as the Lord has forgiven me. And that honestly is this super tall task that we often struggle with. I don't know if you agree, but I think that's it's just super hard to get our minds wrapped around the idea that we need to offer the forgiveness of the gospel to others.
Do you think I disagree with it's hard to forgive other people? No, obviously it's hard to forgive other people. And you could argue, I mean, that's because our own pride, our own, I want to say...
sinfulness?
Yeah, sinfulness. I want to say, I'm kind of losing the word here. It's like, I've lost the word. I'll find it in like 2 minutes. It'll come back to me. But because of our own like view of ourselves, like we think we're more important than we are. And when people sin against us, it's like, how dare you do that to me or stuff like that. And so imagine how God's sitting there. Like God's a perfect being who created us and loves us. And every time we sin, he's sitting there. You know how slighted you feel when someone does it? And I'm talking like, imagine someone does something so wrong to you, like out of the blue. Like you've done nothing wrong in this situation. And then just out of the blue, they do something and it's clearly like that person's at fault. Imagine you are at zero at fault. The feeling you have there is like, why would this happen to me? Why would they do this? Like, I didn't deserve this? And how hard it is to forgive them, varying, like, depending on what degree, right? Like that, whatever action they took against you could be very serious or very minor, but still, it's 100% their fault. It's very hard to forgive that person. So now we're comparing that to imagine God with every human being of all time with a very severe degree has sinned against him, and he forgave that.
Yeah,
that's the Wow, I just lost my speech on that. That's what you're comparing against each other. Like, how can he forgive that, but we can't forgive each other?
Exactly.
That's what you're trying to say there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, how is it that I'm so accepting of God's forgiveness of me, yet when it comes to me forgiving my friend who has oftentimes not even slighted me that much, it's not as though like I'm perfectly innocent in...
Yeah, like in my example, most of the times it's not someone just did something and you're 100% innocent. You're probably, maybe you're 40% at fault and they're 60% at fault.
Exactly. It's not as though like we are perfect in all of our relationships. So, no,
you are not perfect in your relationship. You are 100% not perfect in all your relationships.
So it behooves us then to forgive others if God has forgiven us. It just makes sense. Yet it's something that we struggle with in our self-centeredness. And oftentimes it's because we think of forgiveness in emotional terms. I don't know about you, but I've heard this often where like somebody will come to me and I'll be like, well, you kind of have to forgive this person. And they'll say to me something along the lines of like, well, I just don't feel like I can forgive them. And I'll be like, well, the answer is in the Bible, Colossians 3:13, of course.
You're such a gracious person.
Right. I obviously, it's not like this blunt, but for the purposes of this conversation, it's going to be a little blunt. Colossians 3:13 says, forgive others as you have been forgiven, right? And the eventual rebuttal is, well, I'm not God. I'm not Jesus. I don't know if you have a response to that situation, but I'll let you go and then we'll...
I mean, we've already answered that.
Yeah, but...
We've literally already given that answer. Yes, you are not God. That's great on you. But if God can forgive your sin, then you have to forgive that person's sin.
But what if I don't feel like it?
It's not a feeling. It's not God. It's not like... I mean, there is a feeling, and being slighted is an emotional... We react emotionally to what happens to us. I keep saying being slighted because that's like the most obvious something has been wrong to you. But just because you feel that way, it's not necessarily like I'll forgive you when I'm emotionally stable. Act of forgiveness is just acknowledging. You first have to acknowledge that you forgive them, and then going about the steps that it take, like the required steps in your own life. So whether that's, you know what, Lester slighted me. Lester, I forgive you. Emotionally, I'm still very hurt by this, and that's not going to change. But now I'm going to go through the necessary steps. I'm going to take this to God. I'm going to work through this. If I need to come back to you and say, like, you have my forgiveness, but also I really need to know, like, maybe why did you do this or something like that. Maybe you should, that probably could have been covered on step one. But, and then praying through it with God, God, help me forgive this person. And then actively trying, even if your emotions are still, like, even if you still feel bad, to live with forgiveness for that person, not holding it against them, not bringing it up, not be like, well, you did this to me one time. It's like, bro, that was 4 years ago. You still haven't got over that. I'm not saying that the emotions are wrong, that you feel slighted, but you shouldn't wait until your emotions are there to forgive people. It's not an emotional response. It's a choice to forgive them. And then as you follow God, your emotions will follow that choice. But it's not like, when I feel ready. Because, I mean, we do this with, I mean, this is, I could get some flack for this example, but I think we do this a lot with marriage. And I hear people in society do like this. I just, like, not in love with anymore, so we're going to get divorced. It's like, okay, but marriage isn't like, if I feel the same way for the next 80 years, then we'll stay together. That's not what you say. Like, but that's how people treat it. Marriage is like a commitment. It's saying, I'm committing to you right now. Whether I feel great about you or I loathe you, I'm committing to be with you for the long run. Obviously, you probably committed to them because at that moment you felt that. But I mean, you talk to anyone who's been in a marriage a long time, there are seasons of their marriage where they're like, yeah, I wasn't exactly excited to see that person every day. Not that they hated them. Loathe might be a little strong of a word, but I think we've adopted that idea of like, if I don't feel it, then it's not real. You know what I mean? If I don't feel it, but I would say, like, that's the worst way to go, because your feelings change all the time. That means like almost nothing is real, because you would just like jump up and down in your emotions. So I would use the marriage example there with like how, you know, you see these people like, yeah, you know what? We were married for 10 years and then we just like, I don't feel that same way that we fell
out of love.
We fell out of love. I don't feel the same way when we got married. Of course you don't feel the same way when you got married. It's been 10 years. Yeah. You have a kid together. There's like, this isn't like, I'm just making this example of the spot. Like, of course you don't feel the same way. That's what happens. Yeah. But if you commit to it, then, this isn't even a marriage podcast. I'm going, but the point I'm making is, it's not the feeling you have towards that person. It's the commitment to forgive. Obviously, the feeling will eventually follow. Yeah. And I would say this. Sometimes when we talk about forgiveness, people think that we're saying, like, forgive them and just, like, let them back into your life. Let them, like, you know, just like, hey, I forgive you. Let's go do the same thing. No, you can put up guardrails in your life. If someone slighted you, forgiving them is not saying, like, I'm just letting you back into the center of my life so you can hurt me again. Sometimes you say, I forgive you, but honestly, Lester, I'm not going to have you around as much anymore because of how you've treated me. I just can't have you that close in my life because we've had that. That's not a bad thing. That's saying I'm setting up a boundary because of the situation we're in. But I can still forgive through that. The boundary doesn't mean like, I don't forgive, boundary, boom, you know? That was a long-winded answer to what you're going for, but I think I just like to cover that, and I went on that spiel of marriage, and if I get in trouble.
No, I really love the stream of consciousness that you went on there. It was actually perfect, because I was going to go to the marriage example, so I'm glad you brought that up. The same way that you were talking about marriage and love as a choice, forgiveness is also a choice. The whole point of forgiveness is that it doesn't feel good. It's not meant to feel good. You think Jesus was up there on the cross like, oh, this is great.
Emotionally, I am in this moment.
This feels so good right now.
Yeah, he's probably, well, we know it wasn't.
Yeah, it was not comfortable for him. It did not feel good emotionally, physically, mentally.
And we know he didn't want to be there.
No.
He asked God to take this burden from him. And that's not, clearly we're not judging Jesus'
actions.
Well,
he's human.
Yeah, but he says, like, God, can you lift this from me? But he commits to going to the cross, even though there wasn't any part of him who's like, I want to do this, or this feels right. He's like, this is a choice, and I'm choosing this for the greater good of humanity.
Yeah, and my second point, actually, about Jesus on the cross is that oftentimes when we say things like, well, I'm not God or I'm not Jesus, you're actually a little bit committing heresy, because you're denying the humanity of Jesus. You're saying that Jesus is all God and nothing else. But Jesus on the cross, demonstrating forgiveness, is demonstrating ultimate humanity, is demonstrating what your humanity should have been. And if you are refusing to do that, you're saying like, I am going to be stuck in my sin, and because unforgiveness essentially is sin. You're holding on to that bitterness, and that bitterness ultimately only hurts you. Right?
Yeah, well, it's the what's the expression? It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. That's like
exactly.
That's what unforgiveness is. That's actually like a real expression too. That's not like we made that up. No, but that's the thing. It's like drinking poison, thinking the other person will die, because you just hold all of this in. And guess who doesn't have any idea what you're feeling? The other person. So like you're just, I mean, and hey, I struggle with like, this isn't something that I'm like great at. Like, I forgive you. Boom, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And to be honest, I probably need more forgiveness than I need to give in my life. But you're right. Holding on to it, choosing to hold on to it is dangerous. And then holding on to it. Because I would say there's two different types. There's one, choosing unforgiveness, actively saying like, I'm not going to forgive that person. And I think we've probably done this in our lives. Like, I will not forgive. That's like, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I get it. It could be so hard. We're talking about some trivial examples, but there's probably things in people's lives that are listening that like, I couldn't even imagine trying to forgive. Like, I've never even come close. So I'm not like laying judgment on unforgiveness. I'm just saying, we see biblically that choosing to unforgive is dark. But then there's also, we talked about the emotions, but then not working on your heart, like not bringing it to God and working through it, that's still harboring it. You may have chose to forgive that person, but if you don't actively work on like, hey, I need to work through this, I need to bring this to God, then all you've done is kind of committed to the forgiveness, but then never followed through with it.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Yeah. I think also at this point, it might be important to differentiate between forbearance, patience, and forgiveness. Forbearance and patience is like, Brett is so annoying, but like, I'm just going to put up with it all the time. It's okay. Like I can just be patient with that and forbear with him. Mm-hmm. But forgiveness is this thing that like, he's like really wronged me. Like he's really hurt me. And forgiveness is where I choose, to let that go, really, to not exact from him my revenge. You know, sometimes we say like, let's say like I broke your laptop, okay, whatever it is, and you go, you know what, it's okay, I forgive you, but just replace my laptop and we're going to be square. This is actually not forgiveness. Believe it or not. Forgiveness would be like, I broke your laptop and you'd be like, don't worry about it. And that's the end of it. Like Brett might not let me touch his new laptop, but he's not going to make me.
Well, I would add, or I would argue or add, however you want me to see, however you want to see me doing this. Yes, me not being like, hey, dude, if you fix this laptop or you replace it, then I'll forgive you, because that's a forgiveness based on condition, which it's
not forgiveness.
That's not forgiveness because we received unconditional forgiveness, right? Like, hey, you're forgiven whether you believe in Jesus or not. That's the crazy thing. That's where the unconditional. I think sometimes as Christians we don't understand the unconditional, because it's like, well, I'm forgiven because I've chosen God. No, He's forgiven people who still won't choose Him. Mm-hmm. Now, can they spend eternity with Him? No, right? Well, you don't disagree with that statement. Please tell me you don't disagree with that. Now, in that situation of the laptop, I can be like, Lester, I forgive you. But Lester can take an action to be like, hey, I broke your laptop. I want to give you the money to, like help you out, fix a new one, or like whatever it is, buy a new one, fix it, or I have a guy I can take it to. Yeah. That's remedying the situation. Reconciliation. But the forgiveness, I'm not forgiving him based on the hope or the expectation that, like, if I say forgive you, then he'll help me out with this, right? I'm just forgiving, expecting nothing in return. Yeah. Now, I would argue the right thing to do on Lester's part would be, I now want to help reconcile the situation. Right. But I can't forgive based on me hoping that he reconciles. And then if he doesn't, then take that forgiveness away. That's not how it works.
Correct. Yeah. So the correct thing for, I don't want to say you to do, is to forgive. The correct thing for me to do is to repay you for the wrong that I've done. Yeah. But again, there isn't that expectation that I would repay you.
Well, there can't, and if you really want to forgive someone, there can't be that expectation of repayment, because all you're doing then is basically making a deal with the person. You're not forgiving them. You're saying, do this for me and I'll kind of forget what you did. That's basically what you're doing.
And I want to take this actually a step further with unforgiveness. the great sin of unforgiveness actually is not so much that you're just harboring bitterness. That is a big deal. You're affecting yourself, really, ultimately. But the great sin of unforgiveness is actually the fact that you are essentially saying that you are unsatisfied with Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. See, when I broke Brett's laptop, Jesus died for that sin. He actually, like, when I intentionally broke Brett's laptop.
This
like
also never happened. This is all theoretical.
Yeah, this is, no, like, I threw it off the top of the church, like, on purpose. I feel like he wronged me, and I, like, chucked his laptop. Jesus died for that sin. And Brett, when he is not forgiving me, is saying, like, yeah, I know that Jesus died for that sin, but that's not enough for me. I need Jesus to die on the cross for that sin, and also you're going to pay for this. That will be enough. And that's simply untenable. Like, you're really exacting more of a, like, you want more recompense than what God received.
Well, it becomes more about, and maybe this is too strong of a word to lay on it, but it becomes almost about revenge than recompense. It's like, you've been given something that you never deserved, never could have, and never could do anything for by God forgiving us on the cross. And now you're out for more, which is, revenge is a strong word because we think of, like, revenge. He's going to get these guys back, you know?
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson in every Liam Neeson movie in the last 10 years. But, like, that, so, but it's like, basically, I want more and now I'm sinning because I want more. I want this, like, I want my life to be made better because of this situation in order to forgive you. And that's just not how it works. Again, we are using a very minor example about a laptop that my laptop is old enough that I guarantee Lester can help fix or buy a new one. Like, it's not like I got anything special. And to be honest, if it broke, I wouldn't be mad. I got a work laptop as well. So, like, we're talking about a very minor situation, but the principle still applies to some very serious things that are going on in life. And, like, we kind of are avoiding them on the podcast just because we don't want to, like, bring something up that may be super personal to somebody out there and be like, you should forgive, because we're not sitting here saying, like, you should forgive. Although we are sitting here saying, you should forgive. We're not trying to be like, oh, look at us, how we forgive. Because I'll be honest, forgiveness for me is like a struggle. Because my pride gets in the way. I'm like, I shouldn't forgive them. They should make the situation right. It's like, wait, what did we just talk about? Not about what they do. It's about just choosing to forgive them. And so when you get into some serious things, if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, that's great for the laptop, but, like, you know, my family's falling apart.
Yeah.
I've never been in this situation. I don't know what that emotions are like. I just know the principles God teaches us. That's all we're speaking from here.
Yeah, I will say, like, I'll just be a little bit more explicit about it. Like, there are things like adultery, abuse, sexual sins, whatever. These are hard sins to forgive. Yet,
because they can be very personal.
Exactly.
Well, they are very, very personal.
And, like, with cases like abuse, like, you've actually physically been harmed. Yet God calls us to forgive. But reconciliation is not the same thing as forgiveness. And this is, we've kind of differentiated between forbearance and forgiveness. Forgiveness and reconciliation also are two different things. Where there is forgiveness, there isn't necessarily reconciliation. Because when you've broken the trust in a relationship, when you've broken that intimacy, just because I forgive you doesn't mean that everything is the same anymore.
Well, it's not. It shouldn't be the same. Yeah.
I'm not harboring bitterness towards you, nor am I expecting some kind of recompense or repayment for the wrong that you've committed against me. But also, now that you've committed this wrong, there does need to be, especially in situations of adultery or abuse,
consequences.
There are A, legal consequences sometimes with abuse, and B, there are guardrails that we need to set up to ensure that these things don't happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when we talk about forgiveness, people think that, like, you can't forgive and be pragmatic at the same time. Like, it almost comes across as, like, if you're a pragmatic person and you forgive, that doesn't work because they work very well together. Like, you can forgive, but also put in the necessary steps in your life so you don't have to return to that forgiveness every single day. And I mean, in these more serious examples, like there's going to be consequences that separate people and should keep people away from each other. In that abuse example, like I have no idea what it'd be like to forgive an abuser. You know what I mean? But for sure, you're not going to like, I forgive you, let's go back to life normal. No, like that life needs to change. There needs to be a dynamic shift. And that's not forgiving. I think sometimes we think like, oh, but they changed the way they interact and that's not forgiveness. No, that's forgiveness, but then with a very smart, pragmatic look on how to continue in life. And I don't want people to get that confused, because I do know sometimes people think like forgiveness is just like, let's reset to where we were.
Yeah. The way I like to look at it is forgiveness opens the door for a repaired relationship, right? But if you don't forgive, you've never opened that door. Unforgiveness and holding on to that bitterness is not allowing that person to repair that relationship. And so when we open the door, we need to be smart about how we reapproach reestablishing and rebuilding that bridge. But you need to have that door open. You need to be ready to repair that relationship. And so in cases of things like abuse, you don't just, let's say it's a husband abusing a wife, you don't just stick that wife back in there and hope it goes well. This is not what Christ calls us to, right? There needs to be counseling. Perhaps there needs to be a time apart.
I mean, I would say there needs to be a time apart, but let's not get into the specifics of what you should do, but we just want to know, like, being pragmatic afterwards is not forgiving. It's just being smart afterwards, right?
Exactly. So reconciliation is just a different thing than forgiveness. Forgiveness is about opening that door. Reconciliation is about rebuilding the bridge.
The only thing we haven't touched on yet that I want to talk about, and I'm sure there's more for you, is I think that sometimes we've talked about how God forgives us, and we've kind of just, we wove that into our points. But I think one thing a lot of people struggle about is receiving forgiveness, especially from God. Like, we've just said this statement, like, oh, God's forgiven you from your sins from the cross. Like, that's like, we said that so casually, but that's a very big idea. And to receive that, and I know in my life, or in a lot of people's lives I know, there's times where it's really hard to accept that you've been forgiven. Or I'll have friends that go, man, like, who could forgive me? And we're not even talking about like people, like just things they've done. Like, I'm not talking about like I've been hanging out with people who are committing like triple murders and stuff like that. Like, we're talking about like people who just made mistakes in life. Nothing that has harmed, like, I don't even know if they've harmed that many people. Like, you would say as a secular person, that's a good person.
Yeah.
But there's like, I don't think I could be forgiven for what I've done in my life. Like, and they actually believe that. And there's times where I think we believe that too, as believers, is like, oh, I just like, sometimes it feels like God couldn't forgive me for this one. Not again. Right.
Yeah.
And I just think the answer is very simple. Like, he does. And it's hard to wrap your head, and even harder to wrap your heart around that. But I would just encourage you, like, the best way you will get to an understanding of that is diving deep into God's word and in prayer. Because if you're not going to pursue him, then you're always going to feel like he doesn't forgive you, because you're never letting him come into your life. You're never opening up to him and letting him show you his forgiveness, like making you feel that. It's a tough thing, because I think we do really struggle with it. And every church says the same thing. No, like, you are forgiven. And it seems like a cheap answer, but it's just the answer. Like, you are forgiven. That's just one thing I want to touch on, because I think we struggle to even get by the fact that, like, God forgives us for our sins sometimes, right?
Yeah, I really like the pragmatic approach that you took there, with that like, no, you are forgiven. The reality of the matter is that you're forgiven. We often say that God loves us, yet we've cheapened that word a little bit, love. We don't realize how deep that love is. And when this person who is saying, like, my sin is unforgivable, and God couldn't forgive this, believe it or not, as deep as you feel like your sin is, God's love and grace are deeper still. And that is when we sing things like Amazing Grace, like, we really mean it. And how deep the Father's love, we really mean that stuff. It is that deep, that there isn't a sin that you could commit on this earth that God cannot save you from. If you are truly repentant, there is not a sin that the blood of Christ does not cover. And it's an incredible thing. It's an amazing thing. It's the best news in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we won't get into there's still consequences to sin. We're not saying like you're forgiven and there's no consequences. There's still consequences to sin, and we've touched on that on other podcasts. We will always touch on that idea. Maybe we'll do a whole podcast on that. But there's still consequences to your sin. So don't think that like just because I'm forgiven, I now am like free to go do whatever I want and I'm just like living in this like fairyland. No, you still will have to deal with the consequences. God doesn't promise that like those things just go away because you're forgiven, but he does promise forgiveness, which I think sometimes we think the more important part of that like dynamic is the consequences going away, but that's just a misunderstanding. Like it's truly way more important to be forgiven than to not have to deal with your consequences, right? And it's tough to wrap your head around. It really is. It's tough. Like I get it. I'm not against anyone who sits there and goes, I just don't understand it. You know why? Because we can't.
Yeah.
Because no human can ever show you that kind of love.
No.
There's no example in nature where we see that kind of love other than when God's involved. So it's like when we talked about the Trinity, this is a concept of God that will always amaze human beings and not always really make 100% sense to us because we can't experience this. We can't go out and feel that unconditional love from any human being on this planet. And even a married couple who's absolutely in love with each other is still doesn't compare to God's love for every single person in this world, which is just like the craziest concept in our mind and we'll never fully grasp. But part of that's a cool thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool, but it is also like kind of big and scary, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think we struggle with an idea like this. Like God died for us. I mean, forgiveness is the like heart of the gospel. Like that's why the gospel exists, is God forgives us. I mean, you could say grace, you could say, mercy, but the truth is the gospel exists because God forgives us. Like we talked about original sin a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it's the like original sin is like the mover. It's the first action in the Bible story. Like that's what starts it all off. But forgiveness is the hero winning the battle. It's the like, what I mean? It's like any like sports movie when they score the goal with like 1 second left. It is what the whole like our whole life is surrounded by. Like our whole existence is centered on the cross and centered on forgiveness. That point. Like it's the most important point in the Bible.
Yeah. I firmly agree with you. And John 15, I was just thinking about this as you were saying that. John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus is the one who lay his life down for you. And that is the greatest love this world has ever seen. Literally. Why he does not have to do that. He did not have to do that, yet he does it anyway. And yeah, every time I talk about it, like I'm still in awe of it. Like that he could see all of my imperfection, all of my sin, and say, you are forgiven.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He could see everything wrong with me and still forgave me, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, if you could see everything wrong with somebody in your life, I doubt you would want to forgive them, because I know I would want to forgive them. So
yeah, you know what's crazy? Like what's even more crazy on top of that is not only does he forgive me, but also he blesses me on top of it. Like not only does God forgive me and restores that relationship with me by his work, he then, on top of that, blesses me with good things. And this is not to say you should have faith in Jesus because he'll give you good things. So
yeah,
I really want to avoid this.
No.
But he does, in fact, bless us. And that's another thing that we can take away from Christ's forgiveness for us, is that not only can we forgive others and should we forgive others, but also we can repay their evil with good. This ultimately demonstrates the gospel. When we say live out the gospel, this is what we mean. That you would not only forgive those who have wronged you, but repay their evil with good.
Yeah, I mean, I've been just reading through the Old Testament, like reading through the whole Bible, but obviously starting in Genesis. But that's just the most ludicrous, like, of course you started. But just reading through, like, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which are not exactly fun books to read, but there's a lot in them. And then Judges. I just got through Judges and Ruth, and it's just so when you know how the story is going to be fulfilled. I don't want to say ends because we don't know how the story ends yet, but how that part of the story is going to be fulfilled and how we're all. It's so interesting because you just realize how many times the Israelites turn away from God. Like in the days of the judges, because there was no centralized power of human there were righteous people. I think sometimes we think everyone was, well, it does say multiple times everyone did what they was right in their own eyes and stuff. But I like the story of Ruth because you meet Boaz, a man who is very righteous in character and very godly and is very noble character.
Also Ruth.
Yeah, no, but I'm not, obviously Ruth. I mean, yes, 100% Ruth. But I just think it's so interesting because you've just come out of these books that's just people suck, people suck, people suck. That's all you learn. And still you see God blessing these same people. Because it's not like Boaz showed up from nowhere. He was from a line of, and it's so interesting to see, not only does he forgive these Israelites over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, but then he continues to apply their blessing that he promised them.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times, I'll promise this. If I had to, if God was Brad, I just need you to oversee them in the desert, they would have never made it out. They would have just all died. You know what I mean? The fact that he just over again forgives and then reaffirms the blessing, then reaffirms the blessing. And that every chance they get, they turn away from him, which we do too. This is not a judgment on them. We do this all the time. And every chance they come back, he forgives. It doesn't say that he's happy with them. He shows God's angry with them and everything, but he forgives and moves on. It's just it just shows you. And then when you know where it's going with Jesus coming, you realize that is just an example of us. We should not, I never look at the Israelites. I hope I never look at the Israelites again and be oh, those guys sucked. I would have done better. No, that is an example of how every human treats God in their life. And somehow he still forgives and blesses. Pretty crazy.
Amen.
I have nothing else to add.
I'm good too.
All right, well, let's end it there, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. Honestly, hope this challenged you in a way that you're maybe I need to forgive that person, or maybe I need to accept that God's forgiving me and not hold on to this oh, he can never forgive me. And obviously, tougher. It's easier said than done. I know that.
Definitely.
But I hope this pushes you off, and maybe there's someone that you've been sitting there and you're you know what, I've been kind of holding back forgiveness because I don't feel it. Maybe I encourage you to just choose forgiveness and take it to God. You'll be in such a better place. Again, easier said than done. But I'll end it there. If any questions, comments, concerns, email testing123@springvale.org. We'd love to hear from you if you have problems, or even if you're hey, why haven't you guys talked about this yet? One of the hardest part of this podcast is but making sure we have a topic that we think would be relevant for most people, or just be helpful, or even just interesting to listen to. And sometimes, that might not be the case for some of the topics for you, but if you email in and go, I've always wanted to know about this, that helps us so much. So thanks, guys, and hope to hear from you.